Thank you very much for the introduction. It's wonderful to be here, if only virtually, maybe next time in person. Although I think it's good that we're able to connect to people all across the region without having to all be in the same place. It really fits the theme of the conference, actually. So that's fantastic. Okay, so do you want me to show any of the introductory slides?
Yes, sorry, Adam. I will just say Adam is beaming into us today from Kuala Lumpur. So he's a few hours behind us. Just for the purposes of recording and registering people's names, we're now providing people with an opportunity to register their professional learning, and I just really need to have people recording their full name so that I know who you are if you're a CSU person, please. Now, to do that, all you need to do is move your mouse over your name on the participants list, and you'll have a pull-down menu where you can select to rename yourself. If you could do that, that would be appreciated. Thank you, Adam.
Great, thank you very much. Okay. Okay, so today I wanted to run through some of my thoughts on the topic. In particular, I wanted to go through just a brief introduction of what open learning is and what we're doing, but then move into some more of the trends and sort of what I'd say are probably the hot topics, if not trends, because I think people start talking about things quite a bit before any action actually happens. So I will share with you what sort of things we're hearing, but I don't know if they'll translate into anything concrete in any time soon. So just at a high level, open learning is a platform that enables education providers to launch education businesses, we call them. Now, I think this, just the term actually education business might be somewhat new to the university sector, because we don't often think of public universities or universities generally as running businesses. But more and more, that's what we're starting to see. And open learning, I guess, has evolved into a platform that enables universities to do that. Now, what we mean by education business is sort of like, let's say, a short course program. It could be an online degree program. It could be a new blended program. But more and more, as I'm sure you're experiencing, all of these things you want to do in a university require a fairly concrete business case for anything to happen. Just now, redesigning courses, for example, so that they're more effective requires a business case in some ways, in some cases. And that is actually quite an interesting thing for us to see, because we often are trying to encourage universities and lecturers to redesign their courses, but people now want to see, okay, what are the concrete outcomes of actually redesigning and rebuilding this? So open learning as a company has evolved into a platform that does really three things. One is it provides the technology, so the cloud social learning platform to deliver large-scale courses and programs. We also have designed the platform around a particular educational philosophy, which is largely aligned to sort of the social constructivist movement. So the idea that students learn best when they're actively engaged, when they're motivated, and when they're working with their peers. And the third area that we've started to move into is being a channel or a marketplace for education providers to promote their courses. So open learning has now grown quite a bit, so we're seeing more interest in that. So just over the past 6 years since we started, over 1.7 million people have enrolled in courses in the open learning platform. Now, the vast majority of those are actually in the past 12 months. So the user base itself has doubled year on year. But the majority of those students actually are from an interesting mix of countries. So for us, our largest user base is in Malaysia. After that, Australia is our second largest. And interestingly, the US is the third largest user base for us. Now, we've never actually focused on the US, but the US market has a large number of working professionals and lifelong learners. And they just naturally find any courses that could be interesting or useful. So without any special effort on our part, we're seeing that a lot of the courses can be quite popular. But I think more interestingly, we're seeing more and more micro-credentials being issued through the platform on a regular basis. Now, for us, a micro-credential at the moment would be either a digital badge or a certificate of some kind. The certificates aren't usually accredited, and very rarely are they accredited. Usually they're a certificate of completion or participation, which don't really hold any weight, but online people still really like to get them. Similarly with badges, we've noticed that when students receive a badge in a course, even though there's absolutely no credit or any sort of real value associated with the badge, the feeling of getting the badge actually for an online learner actually means something. So it's quite interesting for us to see. We always see people thanking the course creator or the lecturer for the badge as if it's such a great gift. And we find that when that occurs, that usually means the community in the course is quite strong, and people are really enjoying what they've done, and they really feel appreciated. In addition to that, we're seeing a lot of peer-to-peer interactions occurring across the platform. So rather than students just coming to, let's say, watch a video and do a quiz, more and more courses on open learning are including project-based learning, activity-based learning components, and that's leading to more peer interaction. Now, some of that will start on the platform, and then it will continue off the platform. To the extent we've seen certain educators even sort of get consulting work out of the MOOCs that they've run on the platform, because the learners might be working professionals, and then they see, they learn things in the course and they engage with the lecturer, and they realize, okay, I actually need this person to help me with a project in my company. So we've seen that actually in some of the project management and marketing courses that are running on the platform as well. So Open Learning as a company has about 70 staff, generally split fairly evenly between Sydney and KL, but we also have staff in Singapore now, and support staff in the US and in Slovakia. So a fairly global team, and we'll be expanding across Southeast Asia in the next couple of years. But I think one of the key tenets of what we're trying to do is shift the style of education from sort of an instructivist, teacher-centered approach to a student-centered, pure learning approach. Now, that's easy to say, and I think we all always talk about it, but in practice, it can be quite challenging to do. And for us, it's not really just the technology. The technology is a key part of it. Obviously, the affordances of the platform make it easier to design courses in certain ways, but it really comes down to the learning design that's occurring in the course. And good learning design is not easy to do. And I think that's one of the big challenges we've seen, which is that while many, I think, universities and lecturers understand what needs to be done to go from sort of PowerPoint slides and traditional assessments to something which is more collaborative and more active in nature, that is a lot of work to do. And it's actually a creative task. It's a design thinking task. It's not really a technology task. You kind of get the technology, then you spend 2 or 3 months designing your great course. And that's something that's actually very hard to speed up, but I think that could be one area that we're all looking to improve. What might be particularly interesting is that open learning kind of straddles 2 spheres. One is sort of the lifelong learning marketplace, which is generally what you see when you go to openlearning.com. And the other is more of an institution or university-centric education portal. Usually these 2 things are separate platforms, but on Open Learning, they're one and the same. So education providers have a branded page where they can showcase the courses that they're offering and their unique value proposition. And those courses also show up in the Open Learning marketplace. But we do have a fairly strict quality control process that we are making more and more strict over time. When we first started, we were quite relaxed because the name was Open Learning, so we figured we had to just let people put up whatever course they wanted, no matter how good or bad it was. But we've changed that, so we're still open, but open to good quality. So we try and encourage course creators to ensure that their course has all the right components, that it has well-defined learning outcomes, that it does actually have activities that will try and meet those outcomes. We can't really assess the content, the accuracy of the content, because that would be quite a bit of work, and we don't have subject matter experts in all areas. But we do try and assess the quality of the learning design at the very least. So that does filter out a lot of courses, and we filter out more and more courses as we go. So probably we might be one of the few platforms that's actually trying to have fewer courses over time in some respect than have lots more. But the idea is that all of the courses the institution runs are still visible on their own website, on their own portal. So they don't really lose out that much. So, sorry. In all of this, I wanted to go through some of the hot topics. So I think they're hot topics because many of them I haven't seen much concrete action. So I think it's important to think of these things as these are the things that are topical and that could change. Although I haven't been in the industry as long as many others, we only started the company about 6 years ago. In that time, there have been a lot of sort of new technologies and new products that have come out, and they become sort of the flavor of the month, and everyone gets very excited about them and wants to integrate them into their course. And everyone starts developing those tools, and then all of a sudden they've moved on to something else. So I think one of the challenges that we have is trying to look at ideas and trends and hot topics and see if they actually have the staying power, and if we actually do have to research them more, and if they are something we should integrate. And I think we also are trying to be mindful of our own mission. So Open Learning's goal is really to increase access to quality education. And when we look at that, in many ways, we're trying to solve some, change management and economic challenges as much as we are technology challenges. And because of that, a lot of the sort of the cool technology that might come out, the cool new products, aren't things we actually readily adopt, because on the ground, when we're trying to increase the quality of courses and education at universities in Southeast Asia, for example, we're still actually dealing with some fairly fundamental issues, like trying to encourage collaboration and project-based learning over just a video. Now, unless you've made that jump, I don't think AR and VR and all these other things are going to really, be that worthwhile. So I think we're trying to solve some of the fundamental challenges first. That said, one of the key things that keeps coming up, more so outside of Australia than inside, to be honest, but I think that might slowly be changing, is sort of the impact of the fourth industrial revolution. Now, ever since a few articles came out about it, and I think McKinsey wrote a report a few years ago, a lot of people got quite excited by the prospects of it, then they got quite scared by the prospects of it, and now maybe they're a bit more complacent about it, unfortunately. But at a high level, when we talk about things like automation and people losing their jobs, that's actually not even the fourth industrial revolution. That's still like the third industrial revolution that we're just now seeing the delayed impact of, or the implementation of, which shows you how long it takes for things to change. But this third and fourth industrial revolution, I think, is having quite a significant impact on the way we think about universities and the place of education in society. And I think it's coming down to two parts. One is there's going to be a portion of people that we are educating to create these new kinds of technologies that could potentially displace lots more people. But nevertheless, we are educating them, and we have to help them design the best products and the best tools with the best motivation and ethics possible. On the other hand, there's a large number of people who will be educated, but they might be lifelong learners. They may not actually have full-time employment their entire life. And in that sense, education will be playing more of a role of helping people understand their role in society, letting people or helping people accept and understand that not everyone has to work. There are other worthwhile things you can do in your life, and that maybe everyone, the ones who are working will support those who don't through some sort of basic income. So I think these concepts are things that are actually, I think, important to the education system, because we often think of, the purpose of education, unfortunately, as getting a job. And people are going to be educated, and we want people to be educated, but they shouldn't, if they don't get a job, they shouldn't, feel terrible about it if we can still support them. So I think this is something that's playing on a lot of people's minds. Just in Australia, some recent statistics I think have been quite surprising, that about 45% of all work activities could be automated with existing technology. And if that's the case, then we have to look at what we can do. But even before that, youth unemployment is very high. And many undergraduates, although they're employed, don't feel like they're utilizing their skills or their education. Now, I think that's actually a fundamental challenge for us, because we often think that by graduating and meeting the outcomes, they're going to get a job in that area. But that's no longer a guarantee. And we don't want people to feel that their education was not worthwhile because they're working in a different field than they got their degree in. Because there should be many things that you learn in your degree, the critical thinking skills, analytical thinking skills, entrepreneurial thinking, that actually would contribute to whatever job that you do. So in some cases, it may be a perception gap. But in other cases, students do actually feel quite disenfranchised, that they had hoped to become something and they went to university for that, and then they didn't end up getting it. But I think this is a challenge that we're seeing universities have to deal with a bit more. Another trend that we're seeing, which has been around for some time, but I think is getting more attention, is that the formal and non-formal education markets are actually about the same size in Australia in terms of revenue. And the universities have normally played in the formal education side. So if you look at online, master's degrees and even undergraduate degrees now, a lot of universities are rolling them out. But the unaccredited non-formal education market is actually the same size at the moment. And in many ways, it will grow much larger than the formal education market. Because previously, or even today, there was a bit of a perception that you go to university for 4 years, let's say, then you go work, and then maybe you get a master's degree. But going forward, people will be upskilling and reskilling their entire life. So universities will need to provide a range of education options that people can continuously do as lifelong learners. And I think that's something that people are starting to look out for a bit more. I think generally MOOCs have been the first manifestation of this. And although we generally think of the challenges of MOOCs as being low completion rates and the quality of the learning experience, amongst others, they were sort of the first foray into this market. And I think we're seeing that now that MOOCs are starting to mature, they're becoming more like short courses. And maybe people will pay for them instead of doing them for free, but they're starting to deliver real value. And at the very least, I think they've sort of broken down some of the competition barriers or the barriers to entry between institutions. So, previously you'd have to go to a university or take a class nearby to your house. Now universities are starting to compete with each other all around the world. Another trend that's in the works, I think, is the AQF review that's going on for micro-credentialing. I find this particularly interesting because it is trying to respond to some of these things that are happening. And I think what I find interesting is that it's trying to sort of formalize the micro-credentials or the micro-credentialing process, which makes sense as it is from AQF. But there is a lot of value in sort of the non-formal education without a formal micro-credential, so to speak. So I think what I'm interested in probably seeing is what impact formalizing the non-formal education market, so to speak, actually has on learners' motivations and what they look for in the course. Because what we see at the moment is that a lot of people, about maybe 30 to 40% of all those students joining courses on open learning, are lifelong learners or working professionals. And they're not actually seeking a formal qualification from the course. Now, with micro-credentials, receiving credit or giving students a pathway to credit at a university, I'm wondering how that will change things. I don't know if it will, but it might be that now people will ask, does this badge give me credit towards a degree, for example? Whereas in the past, they were just happy that they received the badge. So I think we may have to be careful that we don't accidentally change the dynamics of the non-formal education market, because I think one of the fantastic things about it is that it is actually based around learning and based around skills development, because there's no formal qualification. So I think we want to try and find a way to provide a pathway and provide recognition, but we also don't want to change the way in which people view it. So they think it's another degree or just a pathway to a degree and focus on the certificate rather than on the learning experience. So we'll see, I guess, where that goes, but we're monitoring it. This is just to give you a sense of sort of the growth of micro-credentials, though, just in open learning. It's hard to find stats from like many platforms, so I just used the ones that I had for us. But pretty much we've seen the number of micro-credentials issued through open learning increase at a faster rate than the number of enrollments each year. That means some courses are issuing multiple badges, more courses are issuing certificates of participation, but I think it's, we'll see where it goes. I've also included completions, because we often get asked about that. And completion rates generally on open learning are a bit hard to average out. So like on this one, it's close to 25-30%, but some courses will have a completion rate of under 2%. Others will have completion rates of over 90% because of the nature of the course. So for example, we've seen courses that issue a micro-credential where that micro-credential gives the student an exemption to coursework at an on-campus university course. Now, in that case, the student, just by doing the online course, doesn't have to attend class. So the completion rate is very high, whereas in other cases, it's quite a bit lower. Another trend that we're seeing a bit, which is one that we've been trying to encourage for 6 years, and I think we are slowly getting there, is the move away from sort of what we call sort of sleepy and pre-designated learning activities. So really passive learning and a move towards more constructive and active learning. Now, this is something that is generally occurring, I think, in many face-to-face classes. But sometimes it's occurring sort of like accidentally or coincidentally, where students are just in the same place and they're working together. And because of that, they're solving problems together, coming up with challenges for each other to do, teaching each other. Those are the sort of things that actually happen on campus at a university that we don't really capture because the lecturer doesn't see it occurring and the tutor doesn't see it occurring. But that's actually where a lot of the learning is actually happening in many classrooms. So moving that online is challenging because in some ways you don't see what's occurring. So you don't know what you're moving. So normally you just move your content online. So in this approach, we're trying to encourage the learning designers to create all of the different types of activities that get students to do that online and to build that community online on the assumption that they won't be able to do it face-to-face because they're not sitting next to each other in a classroom. So this is a move that we're trying to encourage, but we are seeing that there is more and more interest in it, particularly because these, if you want to instill the higher order thinking skills in students that we want, particularly for the fourth industrial revolution, then we need to have more activities like this. Another interesting trend that we're starting to see is a change in the way students use mobiles for education. So we started off with mobile being a companion, and then we kind of went to mobile first, but we are hearing talk now of sort of mobile only, which is a somewhat interesting concept in that you design the course so it's really only done on the mobile. You assume that you have to use a mobile for the course. Now, there's a couple of reasons for this. One is more people now have mobile devices than they have computers. particularly in Southeast Asia, but in Australia, I think we're seeing that as well. Like a lot of younger people now don't even think about buying a laptop or a desktop computer. They just have a mobile with a fairly large screen. So because of that, we're seeing we're seeing an interest in sort of this mobile only approach, which leads towards, I think, mobile only or mobile optimized learning design. So if you can use all of the features of a smartphone in designing, when you're designing your course, then the student can actually become almost like a fact finder in other ways as well. Like they've got a camera on their phone, they can go take pictures of things, they can easily reflect. It's easier for them to share and discuss things on the mobile than it is on the desktop. So if you know your students are going to be using a mobile, then you can design some fairly interesting activities that make use of all the features of the mobile that you wouldn't have on the desktop. We're seeing sort of a few changes in the workforce and the job market as well that's driving some changes in education. So some of the newer skills, I believe this is from the World Economic Forum, some of these sort of emerging skills, which I had hoped would be the skills that people had for a very long time now, but apparently they're emerging skills. Things like creativity, originality, analytical thinking, design thinking, ideation. These are the sort of things, obviously, that I think employers are now saying or now recognizing that they really want in all of their employees, not just in a subset of employees. And I think that's probably the difference. Like in the past, an employer would have always said, yeah, I want, an analytical thinker, but they also would want a large number of people who can do the same thing many times. They no longer want people who can do the same thing many times because that can be automated. So now the push is towards more people who actually have those skills. And just a few more, I think, stats that we've seen as well. One is that graduates are now very likely to change careers on a regular basis. Apparently up to 17 changes in up to 5 different careers is what we're expecting now. And that's a remarkable change, because it means that when we're trying to educate someone, particularly at the undergraduate level, we're no longer preparing them for a particular job. We're kind of preparing them for any job they could potentially ever want to have, and hoping that we've given them the skills to adapt to it. And that's quite a challenge when we're designing courses, because a lot of the way things are structured is around working out, what courses might be required for a particular industry. And I think this is actually interesting because it kind of goes against another trend, which is trying to get industry more involved in academia and the university sector. Because while we want industry involved, a particular industry being too involved might mean the courses are steered in that particular direction, but the students going through those courses will end up working in 5 different industries over their lifetime. So we almost have to get lots of views from lots of different industries, but then work out the best way to help the student develop their transferable skills so that they can work across a range of different industries and in a range of different roles. And I think that's something that requires a more nuanced view of sort of the industry academia engagement, which I haven't seen occurring too much. I've seen a lot of attempts to get industry involved in academia, but getting them involved and also pushing them back a bit, I think, is something that probably we need to work on a bit as well. And just there's also a recent report by Holonik, which is quite a good education tech research firm, just highlighting a few trends as well that I thought were quite accurate. One is actually on the industry employer side, industry academia side. Industry is getting more involved in building programs themselves for their own company or their own industry. This is something we see obviously with companies like Udacity in the US, where they're working with tech companies to build programs designed to get people working at the tech company. And I think we're going to be seeing more of that. And we're also seeing a broader range of providers getting involved in the space, but I think we will also see some consolidation as well. It'll be much harder for all of the for the, I guess, the world or the country to support as many universities and as many colleges as it currently has. When more and more people are taking courses online and they have more and more options, you would assume some consolidation would occur, but it's not entirely clear that it will or it has. So those are some of the main things that I wanted to touch on, but I'm happy to have a bit of a discussion and answer questions as well. So I'm not just talking the whole time.
Great. Thanks, Adam.